I'm Karen Stabiner. I'm the West Coast editor of The Counter. And I'm very pleased to be here with these people to talk about the future because it's so easy for all of us to get stuck in the present and the past. We have two cooks, we have a farmer, and we have someone who bridges those two things. All of them time travelers, really, as anybody has to be if they're going to get out of this in one piece, even if the piece looks different than it used to. Learning from the lessons of the past 8 months, even as they go to work every day, and plan for the next season, the next year, life after the vaccine, and who knows, life after that. So I've asked everyone to tell me how they'd like to be introduced, which is revelatory, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. Roxana, Jullapat, why don't you hold up your hand? Well, I guess people can see your name. Co-owner and head baker of a grain-focused and product-centric bakery and cafe called Friends and Family. I have done my time eating carbs at that bakery. Romeo Coleman, Romeo, let people, okay, who is a second generation farmer, has been a member of the farmers market community all of his life and runs Coleman Family Farms, which has been chemical free since 1963 and is a fixture at the two largest farmers markets in Santa Monica, California. Eric Campbell, owner of Barbara Jean's Soul Food, a catering company, has his own line of sauces that he's developing and is finishing up this year in the culinary arts program at Los Angeles Trade Tech Community College in South Central Los Angeles. And if you need to know more about him by the end, you can go back to The Counter because we have a big piece on trade tech today and a different and more diverse and very ambitious generation of culinary students. And Karen Beverlin, whose official title is Vice President, Local and Specialty at FreshPoint Produce in Southern California. But anybody who's been to the farmer's market twice knows her as the produce whisperer. She is the one who is an essential information source on the best produce and dairy products and makes a lot of matches between restaurant chefs and independent farmers. So we're just going to start right off because 45 minutes doesn't feel like much. Roxana, I was interested that you emphasized specifically grain-focused and produce-centric when I asked you to describe Friends and Family. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that as your priority, and then how you've had to retool during the pandemic to keep that afloat, because I know you had to scale way back and then build back up.
Well, I didn't start out in bakeries. I actually worked in restaurants for 15 years before I switched to having my own bakery. And, you know, my restaurant philosophy, even like I see Eric and I know exactly how he feels and is thinking, and like those commitments you're making to your career right now, you will have them all through your entire career. Like they don't ever go away. So since I was very young, my focus was always on seasonality. I was very attracted to this way of thing that we do here in California, where we have this like vast availability of produce, fruits, like enough to go crazy. And like, how could you not tap into it and just like make it like the thing that dictates what you make for the rest of your life, really. And I'm not exaggerating that I did that for 15 years, and you can't turn off that switch. So even though you're not making desserts that are so about the fruit and every single ingredient can be super micro seasonal, you know, a bakery relies more heavily in the starch, right? And yet you find every opportunity you can to introduce all those flavors, because it's a switch you can't turn off. It's basically a part. It's like a limb. You can't just cut it, you know? That's that side of your brain. It thinks that way. You can't remove it. And then the grain thing happened to me kind of like very naturally, because all these farmers started to introduce grain as into their product line, and it was some at the farmers markets, some not on farmers markets, and they're looking for like guinea pigs, like, hey, can you try this? Tell me what you think. And you, and same thing, once you know that, you can unlearn it. And once you understand what difference it makes into your cooking and baking, you can't go back. So even as the pandemic has made things a little bit more challenging and accessibility to produce and great grain a little bit more scarily unaffordable, right? Like, because everything is affected price wise by this super challenging times. You can't stop doing things the way you do it. You just learn to like downscale and do it in a smaller way. And you know, we all have less availability of products, so you just like kind of like see like where do I get more bang for my buck? Where do I make the statement without missing out? But it's not like we're like, oh, let's use something cheaper. No such thing, you know?
So that
No
the commitment between, and I'm going to use not small, I'm going to use independent, between the independent restaurant and the independent farmer, right?
Right.
Has been sustained for you through these 8 months. There was not a moment where you said, that's it, canned peaches.
You know, just to give you an idea that really illustrates how it all worked. My husband used to go to the market with the van. Now he goes with his Prius. So it's different quantity, but same. We're still doing the same things.
Okay. Do you want to talk a bit, before I ask Eric about this, do you want to talk a bit about that scale back? Because you've talked to me a bit about sort of learning to be more cautious, learning to change the proportions of what you're doing so that you can sustain the business you're doing with independent suppliers.
Well, you know, it's very easy to speak about it right now. It's been, what are we on, 10 months into the pandemic? Yeah, 8, 10, I don't even know who's counting, right? Right. So the one thing that I'll say is that in retrospective, it has been really positive for us to remain small and nimble, because we have to be able to switch back and forth into one format or the other. In the beginning, we tried, you know, 1 week we're doing just online orders. The next week we're like, okay, let's open. And then we even considered, can we do outdoor dining? No outdoor dining, you know? So just the flexibility and sort of not be in your head about that romantic idea, who we are, who we want to be, what we stand for, but just kind of like be ready to adapt. So that makes you a lot more risk averse. And we have been far more resilient than I thought we would be. I feel, you know, hurt and scarred by this year, and yet very proud and kind of like surprised we've been able to pull it off.
And can you single out a particular change you made in the way you operate that helped you get through and that you think you're going to continue for a while?
Yeah, I think the thing that is more significant for me is that there is a new community agreement. It's not something we did alone. There is sort of a new understanding, a new pact, where we kind of like move away from that culture of the customer is always right. Now we have other priorities. Our priorities is to keep ourselves safe, to keep our employees safe. That is first and foremost, right? And hopefully be financially solvable in all of this. And yet all of a sudden pleasing our customer wasn't just the first thing we worried about. It became kind of like the second thing we worry about. And the fact that they have a responsibility towards us became very important for us. So we offered to them safety as a value added to our products. And also we expect in return not only their cash, we expect from them the following of the protocol that keeps us all safe in a COVID environment. And also like their enthusiasm to support us is why we're still here, you know?
Okay. Eric, we're going to move to you because it's interesting. The two of you are sort of on this continuum. You know, you can see Roxana there in the distance waving back at you. You've already got your catering business. But what was interesting to me about your story is that you had a job or an internship, I'm not sure which, at a very produce-rich restaurant, which for you has been the introduction to a different way of making dishes, a different way of approaching food. And I'd like you to talk a bit about how that's changed your notion of the future. You know, you mentioned, well, I'm going to need a place with a space big enough for all this beautiful produce. So talk a little bit about your introduction to the relationship between restaurants and farmers.
Well, the shop that I work at, there's just this influx of fresh produce every day. I'm there 3 days a week, and the other 4 days I'm either in school or running my catering company. Being exposed to produce at that quality, at that quantity, has further inspired me to want to make soul food and want to make the type of cuisine that I make in a more healthy fashion. And if I have opportunity to work with farmers and know that I'm getting a product that hasn't been, laden down with pesticides, or shipped from like Wisconsin, and it came from, Northern California, or somewhere much closer, I'd feel a lot more um, secure in that product, that I'm giving my clients the best possible product.
Okay, so I can see a day where you go down to the Santa Monica Farmers Market, see Karen, go visit Romeo. It's all a whole
Absolutely.
huge operation here.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So again, you had talked at one point about having a food trailer, but now you're thinking more about having some sort of storefront first so that you do have a facility where you can store all this produce.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's the smarter move, just because of the way things are going. It definitely will be something I'll do a little bit further down the road, as far as getting a trailer and being able to take the food to people. But just right now, until we're more sure of how we can safely feed the world, I think it's safer for either to have a delivery service of some sort to take the food to people, or have people come pick up the food. And so a storefront is the safest way to do that. There's no place for you to sit down. You come, you order, you get your delicious food, and you go enjoy it. And that serves two purposes. It gives me a vehicle to be able to feed people. It also gives me a workspace to be able to not only cook the food, but be able to bottle up my spices, bottle up my sauces. And now I have a warehouse, loosely speaking, to produce a product that is good for the community, because all of my spices and my sauces are low sodium and low carb, so anybody can eat them.
So there's a thread here that I hadn't actually anticipated when we were first talking, which is this is now not so much a back and forth, but a triangle. There's the restaurant, there's the farm, and there's a new kind of relationship to the community. I mean, you have a mandate here to
Right.
feed the community in a better way than perhaps they were getting fed buying the same kinds of dishes from somebody else.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like it's my responsibility. And what really sparked it was my own family. Like, it hit close to home. My grandfather is a diabetic, and he has a heart condition. My mother was just recently diagnosed with a heart condition about a month ago, actually right before November. And it is just kind of helped me double down on making the food that we are all used to, that we all love, but making it in a way that won't harm us.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate that you were all giving me such really elegant transitions to the next question with the next person. No, I couldn't write it better, but Romeo, when we discussed this before, you have really the most quantifiable shift that you're making. I would like you to explain to people what you're going to be doing with the next season's planting and CSA boxes, because Romeo is truly a fixture at the Santa Monica Farmers Market. And, if the chefs get there early, sometimes the rest of us have to settle for what's left. But that dynamic's going to change a little bit in response to the pandemic. So why don't you talk about that? Your audio's off, Romeo. You need to unmute yourself. There you go. Okay, start over.
I think when in the mid 90s, we were doing around 7 farmers markets, and they were more locally in Santa Barbara. So we started a local presence up here. And then we moved, we were still at the Santa Monica market at the same time. But with a lot of restaurants coming in, we decided to try and shift our focus to the restaurants. And that built up really nicely just by itself on its own accord. And we were able to supply a lot of great restaurants with produce. And with this pandemic happening, I think we need to get back to a more local thing, which is what I'm gonna do with 5 other farmers, run through Rio Gozo Farm in Ojai. And it's a CSA, which a lot of people on the East Coast are used to a CSA, but out here in the West, it's kind of a new thing. past couple of years. So we're going to try and shift part of our farm focus to staying more local so that we can keep our foot in the door. So if another pandemic happens, we can support the local community with a nice, great produce.
And so what portion of your land, what percentage of it are you going to give over to CSA crops?
I'm going to try and move around 25% of it to CSA crops for the upcoming year and see how things go. I think people feel really safe having a delivery of fresh produce, you know, without any contact delivered to their house. It's a new thing for the pandemic that came up, and a lot of people are excited about it. And there's been a lot of returning customers, so to speak.
Did you do some CSAs over this last season, over the summer?
No, we've never been a CSA farm. We've always done farmers markets and restaurants, so it's a different thing for me.
And how have you decided what to plant on the CSA land?
I haven't decided yet.
You haven't decided
No, I'm talking to some other farmers who have done CSAs before and trying to get ideas, and we're trying to cooperate with each other and formulate a plan to, you know, provide the best produce.
And then actually a question has come in, because I'm trying to look two places at once, about will you bring boxes to the farmer's market, or is the farmer's market still going to be walk down the beautiful aisle and pick what you want? Or
there has been a couple of farmers that have done that. They brought boxes to the farmer's market, but I want to kind of keep that separate because the locations of Santa Monica to where we are is 86 miles. So I think that if you're in Santa Monica at the farmer's market, you can basically make your own box with what you want in it because there's so much produce available by all the different farmers. So I'm shifting just to CSA just to Ventura and Ojai area, which is where we live and where one of the farms is. So I'm going to try and keep our foot in the local door. Just, you know, I mean, they talk about shutdowns. If they shut it down so you can't drive 20 miles, then I'm in the local area already. Right. So just, I don't know, thinking outside the box for the future.
Well, I think everybody here, so, you know, is thinking outside the box, but let's look at what Roxana said from your point of view. You know, she feels a need. She's driven by the desire to work with independent farmers and high quality produce and grains. And she felt a responsibility to that relationship. What's it been like for you trying to supply restaurants, and how do you imagine that's going to develop if we ever get out of these shutdowns?
It's a big responsibility, you know. Started years ago with Nancy Silverton, and I've seen a lot of people come through and they have their own places. And so it's a big responsibility because we're trying to provide special produce to special people to make a special plate for someone who wants a special experience. So it's all special. Right. But it's a huge responsibility, and trying to not deal with them, but go along with them through this roller coaster of this year has been very difficult because I've seen, you know, some people have had to close, and it's really tough. I don't know what to say about it, you know.
When you look at the new 75-25% setup and you imagine the future, and I have to say, anything we imagine is purely that, because nobody imagined this, and here we are. But do you anticipate post-vaccine, and I'm going to talk to restaurants coming back, or do you think there's going to be a new way that the pie is divided up? How we eat?
I think there's still going to be really nice restaurants that serve special product, because you're in California and we're able to grow all these different things from around the world. And instead of traveling to Peru to get Huacatay pea stew on potatoes, you can go to a restaurant in LA that might be one of their specialties. And there's a special place for it.
So we are in a privileged place. We should probably make that disclaimer. As unlucky as everybody is, we are somewhat luckier, if you can talk about relative luck. Last question for you. No, never mind. We're going to move on and come back to that. Karen, it's time for you, because Karen has what I call the both sides now perspective, because so much of what she does at the market, you can go there and see her. You know, she's standing in a knot of people because half of them are chefs who want to know about this particular potato, and half of them have just heard her utter the word nectarine, and they want to know what she has to say about that. Tell me what the new normal you think is going to look like, the relationship between independent farmers and restaurants moving forward.
I've experienced a lot of, you know, both what Romy and Roxana have talked about, and that is farmers trying to figure out what they can provide to restaurants that might be a little bit different than a year ago, and chefs trying to figure out what they can use and how they can use it in their restaurant in order to buy more from the farmers. And in some ways, a lot, Roxana, when they opened Friends and Family, they had a little retail market like on one wall. But a lot of restaurants didn't have that. And so a lot of them have been used the farmer's market product or a small family farmer product as a catalyst to, oh, we're not buying as many apples as we bought last year, so let's buy more apples, make jam and sell it. Let's buy more. Most recent from this season has been apples and pears. And when one day the farmer's market decided not to be open, was that November, I think?
Yeah.
But the city still let the farmers come down to fulfill their orders for restaurants and wholesale. And when I was texting a bunch of chefs saying, okay, the market's closed, and then everybody kind of stepped up and said, do we need to buy more? You know, what do we need to do to help, since they won't have table sales? So it's that kind of commitment to the ethos that I think has, you know, like Roxana said, the difference between going with a van and going with the car, but still trying to do whatever they can to help each other. And I mean, that's a great thing to see. And it's a testament to the farmers market community, as well as farmers' commitments to chefs and vice versa.
You know, I think unfortunately there's a dark shadow on this comment, because I'm thinking we see headlines every day. There was one today, 110,000 restaurants, that's the latest tally, have gone out of business either permanently or temporarily. You know, Carolyn Stein from a restaurant group here was quoted over the weekend talking about a mass extinction event. And from what everybody's saying, though, there's this relationship between restaurants and farmers. So I have to ask a question I hadn't thought of. Of the farmers who go to the big markets in Los Angeles, have there been casualties?
I can't think of any farmers right now that have gone out of business. Is that what you mean by casualty?
Well,
who have actually closed their doors. Well, we have some farmers that aren't coming to the market any longer because either the farmer's older or has an immune issue and they don't want to be exposed. They don't want to leave the farm. In that case, the farm set up a farm stand or revamped and enlarged the farm stand that they had near their farm. But I think that so many people, whether they be a restaurant, everybody's trying to be nimble, like what Roxana said. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the big takeaway from this, is that the word of 2020 is pivot. Mm-hmm. Everybody is pivoting and just trying to figure out, like, every week what's going to work. And the farmers are doing the same thing. The challenge for farmers is they're 30, 60, 90 days out from being able to pivot. Their pivots aren't as quick as Roxana's. So that makes it more difficult for them. And, you know, that is a challenge. And I think that we're all just hoping they can hang on, doing what we can to support and hoping they can hang on.
So what you're, I mean, so the difference is, to boil it down to those apples and pears, Roxana or Eric could decide to make something with apples and pears tomorrow, but Romeo can't decide to grow or not grow something tomorrow.
Right.
We've got a longer lead time.
He can decide.
Yeah, but he can't.
He's not going to have
Right,
any.
it's not going to happen. Right, right. Let me do this. Let's be better than the government and reach across the aisle. Okay. I would like to hear from Roxana. What do you need from small farmers to enable you to continue to get through this?
Right. Well, I don't know if like people watching know that we actually know each other, and we've known each other for 20 years. And I've been to Romeo's farm, and I've seen his kids grow up, and I met his parents. I mean, I'm gonna tear up. So this is really a very we have a responsibility to each other, but I think more than anything, our responsibility is to survive, because if we can keep our businesses open over time, Romeo will have a customer, a repeated customer that will come and get lettuce and that chocolate mint that I love that he grows. And you know, like the reason why I use a lot of the flour that I buy right now is because Karen introduced me to it, you know? So I guess the reaching across the aisle means like, take care of yourself, make sure you're gonna be here next year. And those guys will have someone to sell stuff
Customers,
to.
right?
Yeah, that's whenever it's really overwhelming and I have the weight of the world, I at night, which is when I go to bed, very early actually, I just tell myself, okay, like if I can just keep these people employed, and by that I mean my people, Romeo can still continue to grow, Karen can still deliver flour to me, and even if we're not making money, let's just make it till next year. So that's the goal. And I didn't want to finish on a
Well, you're not done. There will be
a
more.
sad note. Yeah. But
No.
The
Listen.
name of the game is just stay open as much as you can, as long as you can. And even if your pastry case a little smaller, it's all right. Like just open those doors.
It's the theory of put your oxygen mask on first.
100%.
Right, and then the other one.
And then you can help the other people who are around you.
And here's the interesting
Really
thing.
important.
I mean, the previous version of dining out, not among the people on this panel, but the sort of high profile version was, I'm going to be a celebrity chef. I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to have a TV show. I'm going to be a brand. I'm going to be an empire. And I'm going to have lots of outlets, because there was strength in numbers. If one of your places wasn't doing so great, another one was doing fine. And the interesting thing about this conversation so far is that it's a whole different value system. You know, it's a whole different value system, and one that might conceivably be healthier longer once we get past the portion of it that makes Roxana cry. Romeo, let me ask you the flip side of it. What do you need from restaurants, you know, to keep yourself healthy?
It's a similar to Roxana, just looking the other way. I mean, we have to stay alive. They have to stay alive. So we have customers at the other end. And to Karen's word, pivot's a word of the year. If we can just keep pivoting, pirouetting, whatever you want to do to stay alive, get smaller, just float yourself through this section and come out the other end, and you know, then we can all say, hi, how's it going? Let's start up again.
We're here. Eric, let me ask you a question about this, because it sounds like your commitment to community and health and another way of feeding people sort of predated all of this. So you graduate in June, I think, right?
I will graduate next fall.
Next fall, okay. Do you feel in any way that, as difficult as this is, that you're coming out into an environment that is somehow more supportive of your values and what you want to do?
I think so. I think one thing that the pandemic has done is forced us to look at ourselves. And in my opinion, there's kind of two sides of it. You either looked at it and said, I need to put better things in my body, or you looked at it and said, I'm gonna eat whatever I want to, and I'm gonna do whatever I want to. This journey to kind of start to change things for me started, when I myself was diagnosed with diabetes 10 years ago. I now weigh 245 pounds. At my worst, I was 345 pounds, and I was eating horribly. I now have, I feel, a responsibility to not only make sure I'm okay, but the people around me, especially if the people around me are waiting for me to cook anyway.
Right.
So, I'm thankful that, I knew how to cook before I went to school. So it was already kind of on my radar to try to put out a better product and just positively influence those around me. Now that I'm in school, and now that that title of chef is looming over my head, I have people's attention more. The techniques have changed, but the sentiment and the heart behind it has never changed. It's just gotten even stronger. That's one thing that this pandemic has done. It's made me go even harder at what I want to do.
Okay. Not that anybody's listening hard enough, but if you had the ear of policymakers, since there seems to be so much whiplash right now, we've got pivot, we've got whiplash, but there's so much back and forth. We're going to shut you down. We're going to open you up. We're going to shut you down. There's very little consistency. So if you had a moment to say, this is what you ought to be paying attention to, these are the variables that can either save and protect small restaurants and farms or put them at further risk. Here's your soapbox. Take a moment. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll go.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, it's not an easy answer, but I really think I'm not going to say what everybody's thinking, or I think everybody's thinking. It's like, we all should have gone home. We should all have gone home, and we should have gotten government support, or even city and statewide support. We can't be like the lower tier that gets to like feed everybody else and sacrifice more while everybody else is like at home, like doing Zoom conferences and not taking any risk. Yeah.
So it would have been, I mean, there is a school of thought. If we had just shut down, absolutely taken the tough road, conceivably this all could have gone better more quickly. That was you're saying?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in that camp.
Okay. Okay. So you don't mind the current shutdown in LA?
Yes, of course. It hurts like crazy. It hurts to the bone, I sell muffins and coffee and loaves of bread. This is very easy to hand to another person. But I feel it from my wholesale customers that aren't able to order from me because they serve they had outdoor patios, and we all feel it. I don't like. That's the thing, that there's no good answer, and all the answers are like should have, like all the solutions are 10 months behind.
Right. Let me interrupt for one moment, only because I've gotten a little note here. We have 10 minutes left. I've been keeping an eye. There are more comments than questions. So if anyone has a burning question, if you put it in the chat to all of us, I will be able to find it. I didn't mean to cut you off, but 10 minutes is 10 minutes. Yeah, Karen B, since I'm Karen S. Is there one thing, I mean, what we've already done is spilt milk. We can't do anything about it. Is there something we should look at right now that would make a big difference?
For our farmers and our chefs?
Mm-hmm.
I think supporting restaurants that have takeout, supporting, because that's like a trickle down that actually does work, that helps farmers, supporting restaurants that buy from local small family farms, supporting restaurants that have always had an ethos of local, sustainable, regenerative, organic, supporting restaurants who, make everything from scratch and do everything themselves. All that's huge. Do your produce shopping at a farmer's market. We're fortunate, again, in California, because we have year-round farmers markets and a lot of locations don't. But where available, do that. And if you are going to a grocery store because there aren't farmers markets in your area, then try to find items that are from local farms. Try to eat seasonally. Don't eat imported things. Try to support, keep your food dollars in your neighborhood as close as you can get them.
Okay, I have two questions in. Let me just, because one of them is for you, Romeo, so you could also fold in what you would like to see if you had a politician's ear. But one of the questions is, what is the difference between a CSA crop and your regular crops? And
it has to do with timing and what the crop is, because if you
can
ask
give us an
Karen,
example?
I grow a lot of different things. I grow, 4 different types of mint, 5 different types of basil, borage flowers. Borage flowers would not do very well in a CSA box because
Right.
yeah. So that's more of a restaurant thing. So it's just the type of what the product is. More common stuff like if you go in your regular grocery store.
Only much better.
Only much better. Roxana,
So
Yeah.
much better.
Well, product wise, I mean, what the specific product is.
Roxana, somebody just had a question for you, which was, did scaling back mean you lost staff? And
Yeah, I did. And but interestingly enough, and I think like the pandemic has taught me so much about who we are as people and what we need, and we're so many differences in generation and genders. And we also had a social revolution this summer, and that affected how we see the world too. I definitely lost some people, but what I found is that there were a lot of my workers wanted, the pandemic made them realize that they had different priorities rather than being here. So I had a few career switches. And I also had people that wanted to move back closer to home and be with their parents and that kind of stuff. Other people work for other restaurants or bakeries that are busier than us, and I completely understand. But overall, I've been able to keep a good number of them around. And then also a lot of people have 2 jobs, right? Because it's like the economics of working in restaurants. So with the shutdown now, I have them only with us. So we're trying to give them a teeny bit more hours where we can.
okay, I did a really interesting question just came up, and maybe this will be what we finish up with. Wait, let me find it again. A lot of the advice we're hearing, eat local, locally grown, all of that is something that people in this space already are familiar with. How do we expand the message to the general public, especially those who might not have access, to the bounty of Southern California? So
Right.
I'm going to start with Eric on this, because I think to some extent what you're doing, cooking the way you cook, now expanding your repertoire to use more fresh produce, is a way to communicate this to a group that perhaps hasn't been exposed to it as much. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? How can you get the message out?
Well, I largely use social media to get my messages across anyway. Honestly, up until this point, I hadn't really expressed to my clients the switch outs that I do in the food. So a lot of the things that I do that are healthier, they have no clue they're eating healthier food.
Do you think it might be worthwhile to add that message once they're enjoying themselves?
You know what? Honestly, Karen, just being involved in this whole thing and meeting everybody, all the other panelists, it's really inspired me to kind of put that out there. So that's how I would use it. That would be the vehicle that I would use. I would use my social media platform to not only let people know that that that's the way we prepare our food, but go to a farmer's market, get fresh produce, get produce that doesn't, green beans is one ingredient. There shouldn't be anything else on the package. So, going somewhere and getting green beans and tasting fresh vegetables is just it gives something completely different to a dish, and it gives something completely different to you as a consumer. So that would be my particular contribution to raising that awareness.
Roxana, how would you do it? Do you think that most of the people who come into Friends and Family are aware of the extremely high quality of the ingredients?
They sometimes, not always. And I do believe in food, letting food speak for itself. But also one thing that I've learned also during this pandemic is that there's a lot of hunger out there, far more than we can prescribe for. And it's also not my place to preach to people how they should eat right now, in this time of scarcity. So I'm not going there. And I however have been pulled in good directions by my community to make sure that certain segments of our demographics are covered. And we have a program where you can buy a loaf for a neighbor in need. There's also community refrigerators all over town. I don't live in the fancy side of town, by the way. LA is fancy, but not me. And we drop bread all the time. We work with the Hollywood Food Coalition down the street, and those are my options. That's how I'm sharing the message, And it's not my place. I just don't feel good about it right now. I hope that there will be a time when we can put that message out. There was a time when I was more involved in garden education projects, and but this is just not the time. Let's just make sure people are getting food first and foremost.
Okay. Karen Beverlin, do you have something to say about that?
I think that my hope is that because farmers markets feel so safe, it's an outdoor venue where you can go and buy your produce and you're not inside a grocery store, that I'm hoping that this time has actually introduced more people to farmers markets in the moderate climate area. Well, and in other climates too, because we started this way back in March. So hopefully this has exposed a group of people to this option that they didn't have before. And initially we had, at least in LA, there was a lot of press about the farmers markets because the media was wondering how they were going to be safe. And that's one of the things that the city of Santa Monica has done very, very well, is manage their market so that people feel incredible in that space.
Okay.
So I hope that more people have been exposed. And then once, like Eric, just even seeing the produce 3 days a week for him has inspired him. And I think that once someone goes to the farmer's market and sees what fresh produce that's truly fresh and truly vine or tree ripe, it makes a big difference. And so the hope is that that will grow and people will become more aware. And I know that in this space, we all are clearly invested in this this community and this idea, but through every Instagram post and every Facebook post, we can expand that, and hopefully the farmers markets do that too. And I use Instagram to tag Romy when I see something that I think he should.
Right. I'm just going to say, because I have been informed that we are out of time here. I would just like to say that I feel better than when we started about 45 minutes ago. And if there's an arc to this, you know, I think that if this partnership of independent farms and restaurants can weather this and get back to something post-vaccine that looks like even, and then grow from there, maybe if we reconvene in 5 years, we will all be talking about how to make this more accessible to more people, because we will have the luxury of health and safety and feel that we can take that step again. So I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to do this. And I think that's it. I really appreciate it. If you're listening to this in Los Angeles, you know, frequent these businesses. And other than that, I believe that Stone Barns will probably now show us all the door. Do we just hit leave meeting?
Thank you so much,
everybody. And thank all of you
See you
who
tomorrow,
stuck with this and
Romy.
listened.
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you all so
Bye
much.
all.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Take it easy.